In this lesson, we're going to do a very short introduction and just a brief overview of the introduction of antiseptics into the medical community. So as we left off in the last lesson, we noticed that we have anesthetics being introduced to reduce pain when we have surgeries within hospitals, but we still got an increase in the death rates, mainly because surgeries weren't as hygienic and this would cause more and more infections. Okay, now at the time, people didn't really realise that these infections were caused by unsanitary practices. However, this is where we have the introduction of antiseptics. Okay, and we're going to just really take the timeline along here, okay, and talk about antiseptics in each stage. So we begin with someone whose name is Ignaz Semmelweis. Okay, if I pronounced that wrong, I do apologise. They showed that doctors could reduce the spread of infections within surgeries when they washed their hands. This is the first thing that was shown. Okay, however, we're going to see quite a lot in this lesson that any kind of suggestion to increase the hygienic conditions in which doctors operate was always met with opposition. So this was always generally met with opposition for one reason or another. Okay. So this idea that you can reduce the spread of infections by just simply washing your hands, in and out of surgery, this wasn't a very popular idea. Okay. So therefore, we have to go to the work of a man named Joseph Lister. Okay. Now, Joseph Lister had seen that they had used in sewage works, okay, something called carbolic acid. They used sprays of carbolic acid, okay, to try and reduce the smell of sewage. And so what he thought we could do is we could take this compound, okay, and instead of using it to reduce the smell in sewage works, you could use it in operating theatres to try and reduce infections to take place. And in 1865, Lister had heard about this new germ theory that we discussed in earlier lessons, okay? And he observed that germs in the air could land on surgical instruments and thus increase infections. So relying on germ theory, so he has to rely on germ theory to come to this understanding. He argued that germs would travel through the air and will land on surgical equipment and therefore infect surgical equipment, which would then be used on patients and cause infections. And this was done in 1865. And as a result, he started using this compound, carbolic acid, okay, in instruments, on instruments and bandages, on things that he would be then applying to patients. And this use of an antiseptic immediately reduced the death rates. Okay, so between 1864 and 1866, there was a reduction of around 50% in the death rates, which is incredible, really, seeing as the majority of deaths resulting from surgery was because of infection. So it showed that was the case because this reduction in infection led to a 50% reduction in deaths. However, as we've already noted before, despite the fact that this is an empirical success, it is empirically shown that this is the case, Lister did always attract opposition. People weren't very happy with the idea that people would have to wash their hands during surgeries, or even before surgeries. Despite this, though, in 1877, Lister published his findings at King's College Hospital, and ever since then, the result was that antiseptics increased operations, tenfold. Okay, operations increased tenfold, and as a result, death decreased as well. As a result as well. So what we have here is just a very basic understanding of how antiseptics came into the medical community. We have the beginnings with Semmelweis over here, but then the real main work that was used here was that of Lister, who was able to use his knowledge of using compounds within sewage to try and reduce the amount of deaths within surgeries, and this was a success, effectively a very successful reduction in infections, which led to a reduction in deaths.